A message arrives while someone is getting ready for dinner with friends. I have a boundary. You are not going if your ex will be there. Keep your location on, answer every text, and be home by 10. The word boundary makes the rule sound settled before any conversation begins. The receiver hesitates. They may understand the jealousy. They may even agree that contact with an ex requires discussion. What feels strange is the form. One person's discomfort has already become another person's schedule. Phone setting and permission slip.
Online language often compresses several different things into the same word. A personal limit, a preference, a request, a shared agreement, a deal breaker, and an imposed rule may all be called a boundary. Once the categories collapse, disagreement can be framed as disrespect before the terms are even clear. I call one version boundary outsourcing. The phrase describes a structure in which my sense of safety depends mainly on your compliance with rules I wrote for you. It is an editorial label, not a diagnosis, and awkward wording alone does not reveal someone's character or intent. A personal boundary usually clarifies what I will participate in, what access I will allow, or what action I will take under certain conditions. A request asks you to consider doing something. An agreement is negotiated by both people. A rule imposed through pressure narrows your choices whether you agree or not.
Grammar offers an early clue. I will not share passwords is located in my action. You must give me your password is located in yours. If shouting begins, I will end the call describes participation. You are never allowed to raise your voice attempts to guarantee another person's behavior. But grammar is not a magic morality test. A controlling demand can be rewritten with I language, and a healthy request may begin with please do not. We have to look beyond sentence form to how the rule was created, what happens when someone disagrees, and whether genuine choice remains. Relationships also contain legitimate interdependence. Monogamy, financial plans, childcare, sexual health, and shared living all require expectations about each other's behavior. The goal is not radical independence. It is to distinguish mutual commitments from unilateral control wearing therapeutic language.
A three-part audit makes that distinction more observable. First, where is the action located? Second, how is the consequence enforced? Third, did the other person have meaningful room to understand, refuse, negotiate, or leave? Test 1 is the locus of action. A boundary says what access I grant or what I will do. A request names what I hope you will do. An agreement names what we have chosen. Confusion begins when a command about your life is presented as a fact about my interior world. Test 2 is enforcement. Self-protection may mean leaving a room, protecting an account, declining sex, separating finances, or ending a relationship that does not fit. Control relies on surveillance, humiliation, threats, isolation, punishment, or making ordinary autonomy emotionally expensive.
Test 3 is consent. Could the other person ask questions without retaliation? Could they say no? Could both people propose alternatives? Could either person conclude that the mismatch is real and leave? Consent is weak when one answer triggers fear, financial danger, social isolation, or an escalating campaign to force agreement. Consider phones. A personal limit is I do not share device passwords. A request is, would you show me the message that concerns us? A negotiated agreement might define transparent communication after a breach of trust. Secret monitoring or mandatory access backed by accusations is a different structure. Consider family visits. I will not stay in a home where I am insulted is a limit on participation. I hope you will defend me is a request. We will leave together if insults begin is an agreement. You may never see your family again removes a major relationship without shared consent.
The controlling effect may grow from real fear. Jealousy after betrayal, panic after abandonment, or concern about substance use can all be understandable. Understanding the fear does not automatically make every enforcement method healthy. need and method should be evaluated separately. Official guidance on coercive control emphasizes patterns that reduce another person's freedom. Monitoring daily activity, dictating clothing or contacts, isolating someone from support, controlling money, and enforcing rules through punishment. The wider pattern and its impact matter more than one dramatic sentence. That is why this episode should not become an amateur diagnostic checklist. Two partners can phrase a difficult request badly and repair it through discussion. Coercive control is a serious safety concept. Do not flatten it into a label for every disagreement about exclusivity, time, or privacy.
For ordinary conflicts, rewrite the statement in 3 parts. Name the behavior or condition. Name the need or limit without prosecuting a personality, and name the action you control. Then invite discussion where an agreement is actually required. Instead of "my boundary is that you cannot look through my phone," try "privacy matters to me, and I will not provide unrestricted device access." If trust is damaged, I am willing to discuss a specific repair plan. If secret searches continue, I will protect my accounts and reconsider the relationship. Instead of "you are not allowed to go out with those friends," try "when plans repeatedly erase our commitments, I feel unimportant. I want us to agree on protected time. If our priorities remain incompatible, I will decide whether this relationship works for me."
A monogamy agreement needs different language because it is relational by definition. I want an exclusive relationship, and for me, that excludes sexual contact with other people. Do you want the same agreement? If not, neither person must be forced into the other's relationship model. Sometimes the honest outcome is incompatibility. A boundary does not guarantee that the other person will accept your terms or remain with you. Their refusal does not automatically invalidate your limit, and your limit does not automatically obligate them to stay. This is one reason healthy boundaries can feel less powerful than rules. A rule promises control. If I say the right sentence, you must behave. A boundary accepts uncertainty. I can communicate clearly and act consistently, but I cannot guarantee your choice or protect myself from every painful outcome.
Consistency matters. Repeatedly announcing the consequence you never intend to take turns a boundary into a threat. Choose actions that are proportionate and real. Ending a call when insults begin is different from threatening to end a 10-year relationship over every late reply. If someone presents you with a boundary, ask clarifying questions. What behavior are you describing? What will you do if it happens? Is this a request, a non-negotiable limit, or an agreement you want us to build? Clarity reduces moral theater and exposes real incompatibility sooner. If you are setting one, check your own leverage. Am I communicating my participation, or am I trying to make refusal impossible? Am I protecting safety and dignity, or demanding proof of love? Would I describe this rule as fair if our positions were reversed?
When there is persistent monitoring, isolation, financial restriction, sexual pressure, threats, or fear of retaliation, do not focus only on rewriting the sentence. Seek confidential support and consider digital safety. The most elegant boundary wording cannot neutralize a pattern built around power and control. Return to the dinner message. The more honest opening is, "Knowing your ex will be there brings up fear for me. I do not want to monitor you. Can we talk about what contact feels respectful to both of us, and what each of us will choose if we cannot agree?" The answer may still be difficult. One person may decide not to go, one may go without location sharing. They may discover a deeper mismatch. What makes the exchange healthier is not guaranteed agreement. It is that both people's agency remains visible while the consequences remain real.
The next time the word boundary ends a conversation before it begins, slow down and audit the structure. Who is acting? How is the rule enforced? Can the other person meaningfully choose? A mature boundary does not make another human programmable. It makes your own participation clear.